on something that, at the very least, should make us think of who we are and where we go. A few months ago, the Canadian Parliament, at the behest of none other than the Speaker of their House, invited an individual to partake in a ceremony being attended by the Ukrainian president. This individual was given a standing ovation in the Houses of Parliament in Canada, whose head of state, remember, is King Charles. A few hours later, it was found out that that individual was a Nazi war criminal, following which the Speaker of the Canadian Parliament had to tender his resignation, and it cannot simply be dismissed as a for-power incompetence. A few days ago, the Canadian Parliament, and you're seeing those visuals on your screens, the Canadian Parliament, the elected representatives of Canada, sat down, or rather stood up, to showcase a minute of silence for an individual who was on a terror suspect list, was on a no-fly list, was under numerous investigations. They stood in silence for a terrorist. So they have given a standing ovation to a Nazi war criminal. Now they've stood in silence for a person with terror charges. Now, not just coincidentally, today happens to be the day of the 39th anniversary of the worst terror attack on the face of the planet, on human history, until 9/11, in which hundreds, more than 200 Canadians were killed by a terrorist bomb which blew up an Air India flight called Kanishka. If you've been watching NewsX, you've been following our coverage of the Kanishka files for the past year. On the right side of your screens are the bodies recovered by the British Navy and Coast Guard of the Kanishka bombings. Now, it makes you think why the Canadian Parliament, which has seen a country overwatching an investigation that allowed for 2 out of the 3 principal accused walking scot-free, and the other currently roaming around in Canadian society. I want you to think about it if Osama bin Laden was roaming around in Toronto, if Mohammed Atta was roaming around in Vancouver. Wouldn't that be odd? Well, that is what's happened in Canada. Now, coincidentally, the Indian Parliament in the 18th Lok Sabha convenes in a short while from now. It was an Indian plane which had Indian crew on board. It was heading to India. Indian intelligence had warned that this was coming. They were seeing the Canadians, watching the test runs, the bomb explosions. We now know it all because it's part of the Canadian report. So should India's Parliament take a minute of silence for the Kanishka victims on the 39th anniversary of this terror attack? Let's open up this conversation. Pathikrit joining us on the broadcast, Professor Madhav Nalapat is with us, and General Gigi Dwivedi with us also. Professor Nalapat, let me begin with you because we are seeing a farcical situation where an elected body of a sovereign state finds it perfectly palatable to celebrate Nazi war criminals accused of genocide and mass murder, to dignify people accused of terrorism charges, but cannot find within their Twitter handles or in their very vociferous speeches victims who themselves were Canadians for one of the worst terror attacks in the history of the planet. How did that happen, sir?
Well, Rishabh, technically, Kanishka being an Indian aircraft, all the innocent victims who perished in that terror attack were technically on Indian territory. So yes, there is no question about it. It is a horrible terror attack, and where Canada is concerned, also a large number of its citizens perished in that particular attack. I presume that every one of the members of the Canadian Parliament have now been provided with information about the nature of the activities of the individual for whom they observed a minute's silence. Certainly, in every constituency in Canada, there needs to be dissemination of information about the particular individual on whose behalf the honorable member of parliament stood for a moment in silence. I think the Canadian people need to know the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But I think it's important that it's not going to be disseminated unless it is done by those who are, the tragic, victims of the relatives, the friends, the well-wishers of the victims of the Kanishka terror attack. So the first thing is to ensure that throughout every Canadian parliamentary constituency, there is information streaming about the nature of the individual for whom the member of parliament has stood in a moment's silence. I hope that will lead to some corrective action. Almost very soon after this Ukrainian Nazi was honored, information started streaming about in Canada about the nature of this individual. I think that was one of the most important factors why the speaker had to resign, and the entire parliament, frankly, disgraced itself. I'm sorry to say, Canada is a wonderful country. It's a democracy, and it's a good friend of India, but they disgraced themselves. So I think it's important, Rishabh. So far, it does not appear as though very many people in Canada are aware of the facts of the background of this particular individual.
Okay.
I don't think they're aware of the terror linkages, and for that reason, I would say that dissemination needs to take place.
Okay.
Coming back to your point about holding a moment of silence, well, some may say that it is an overreaction. Some may say it's a necessary reaction. The jury is out on that. But one thing I think will be, in case such a thing is held, in remembrance of the victims of the bombing, I think it will be a lesson to any other government in any other country that is being incentivized by the Sino-Wahhabi lobby.
But what I don't understand,
India,
and it's a fundamental problem. In general, the way they help me understand it, and our viewers, for the better part of 2.5 decades, when it comes to combating terrorism, the principal complaint of our representatives at the UN, our political representatives, to the highest levels, the Prime Minister himself coming and saying this publicly, that when we used to go to Washington, to London and tell them, listen, there are terror attacks taking place in India and these are the perpetrators, we were told it's a law and order problem. It's your problem, it's your problem, it's your problem. For the past 2 decades, India has been working in the UN to get all these fine countries, including the Canadians, to simply agree on a definition of terrorism, and we have failed. We've been trying, we have failed. So, after having experienced terrorism themselves, the people who cannot even tell you how to define a terrorist, the people who potentially are standing in ovation for a terrorist, and yet we are so shy that we can't mark in our Houses of Parliament a terror attack on its 39th anniversary that killed Indians and blew up an Air India plane. Why not? Why shouldn't we do it?
Well, we should first and foremost, let me share with you that it may be 39 years when this grave tragedy struck, but the pain, the sadness has not diluted. I think the wounds are still fresh in the hearts and minds of 329 innocent lives that were lost. And we cannot wish away the fact. In fact, this stands out as one of the worst aviation disasters in the history of mankind. Now, second point that you raised as to why the West, Canada, or America, they don't see the terrorism as we see it. Well, the first and foremost is, Rishabh, till 9/11 took place, Americans did not believe in terrorism. They did not believe the definition of terrorism. At least after that, there was awakening, and they did realize that there is some evil known as terrorism. But the point is, there are some compulsions, both internal and external. Internal compulsion, they have to play to the home constituency. After all, Trudeau has to play to the constituency of people
But
like
General
Jagmeet.
Dwivedi, they can play to whatever constituency they want. When in the House of Lords, House of Commons, morning, evening, night, they're discussing farmer protest, they're discussing Jammu and Kashmir. When in the Canadian Parliament, they are discussing us all the time. Look at Justin Trudeau. He's making phone call after phone call. He's even calling up the Jordanians to lobby against India on all sorts of things. There are journalists out there going to Australia and making documentaries how India is running a hit job all over the world. I mean, in the face of all of this onslaught, which is the actual hit job, why don't we stand up for ourselves? Why don't we remind the world that what actually happened was a terrorist attack that blew up a plane? Why are we so shy?
Absolutely, Rishabh, I could agree with you more. I think we need to be very forthright, very vocal, and we need to beat the drums in the right quarters that this was a great tragedy, and it doesn't end it there. You see, you brought out that on last week, on 18 June, the same parliament has honored Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was a confirmed terrorist, and they are observing 1 minute silence. So you can actually make out the skin of these people as far as terrorism is concerned. I like to make two important points. First and foremost, Rishabh, having handled terrorism, insurgency, militancy in India, I think we need to make it very clear to the world that we are one of the worst affected by this evil. And second point is that we need to also sensitize the public. Public in these countries, because the politicians have their own agenda, but the public has to be sensitized, and that requires very proactive diplomacy. That
No,
requires
the proactive diplomacy is happening because the diplomats of India have already responded to this. Okay, and I'm wondering why the rest of us can't. Why Parliament can't? Morning,
yes,
evening, night. I mean, I've lost count. I do have lost count of how many times the UN Security Council has dragged up the farmers' protest, dragged up Kashmir. How many times the House of Lords, House of Commons? They are all obsessed with what's happening in India. Okay. Now, I'm not saying let's be obsessed with what's happening in Canada, but on the 39th anniversary of a major terror attack, surely let's open this up for people watching the broadcast. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a member of a proscribed terrorist organization, the Babbar Khalsa. Ladies and gentlemen, it was the Babbar Khalsa that blew up the aircraft on your screens. He conspired to carry out terror attacks in India. Nijjar used to send funds to India through various MTSS services and Hawala channels for developing a network of sympathizers for undertaking targeted killings in Punjab. He was trying to arrange arms and ammunition from his Pakistan-based associates for executing plans. Nijjar was associated with Sikhs for Justice that has been trying to radicalize Sikh community across the world in the favor of creation of Kharistan. He has been trying to incite Sikhs to vote for secession, agitate against the government of India, and carry out violent activities through various posts, audio messages and videos posted on social media. He has been designated as a terrorist under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act of India. This is the National Investigative Agency of India's charge sheet against Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who is being honored posthumously by the Canadian Parliament. Now, let me get Pathikrit into this because he sat with me in these telecasts. Pathikrit, let me just read this out to you. Ripu Daman Singh Malik, close ties with Babbar Khalsa, accused of having masterminded the construction of the bombs and funding of the operation that blew up the Kanishka flight, walked away scot-free from the Kanishka trials. Talvinder Singh Parmar, He had a rap sheet of murders and assassinations. He ran the Babbar Khalsa from Canada. He was arrested in Germany and then extradited to Canada, not to India. A grade A terrorist criminal couldn't be convicted for the Kanishka bombings. Ajay Singh Bagri, Parmar's number 2 and fundraiser, sued the Canadian state for his trial in the Kanishka bombings. This man went and made a speech that he would not rest until he had killed 50,000 Indians. Walked away scot-free. Inderjeet Singh Ryat, the only person who was convicted in the Kanishka trials, he was accused of the murder of Tara Singh Haier, a Sikh journalist in Canada. He murdered another Sikh. He was released on bail in 2008 after having spent just 3 years in jail, and he was declared a free man in 2017. He is walking around in Canadian society, free man. Now, why shouldn't we be upset about this? Patikrit.
So, Rishabh, let me tell you one thing. I don't believe that pleading with the West is going to help anything. What I strongly suggest, and I agree with you, not only we should commemorate it in the Parliament, but also we should invite, the ambassadors of Canada, United States, the other Five Eyes countries, and all the countries of European Union to commemorate this day. This day should be commemorated and homage should be paid in all the Indian embassies across the world. What we have failed to do, and I repeat this, we have failed to do even this time, is to create a communication with the world. The 9/11 happened, the Americans made the whole world, feel for it. Even 39 years down the line, we haven't done much on this. Secondly, why are we not going to the ICC and asking, to consider the Canadian government as complicit to it? So we need to tell the world the whole double standard of hypocrisy that the West has when it comes to terrorism. Anything that hits the West is considered terrorism, but anything which happens anywhere else, if it doesn't serve their purpose, they will not call it terrorism. And I repeat something which I've stated in the past as well. Canada is not doing these things on its own alone. There are other countries which are discreetly, directly supporting it, including the United States of America. So I think we should call the bluff of the West when it comes to this entire double standard and the hypocrisy they have on the issue of terrorism. While we say that we are emerging as the voice of Global South, where is that entire PR machinery to make the world believe and feel the pain of the 1985 incident, which is no less than that of 9/11? Where is the government machinery working on?
I thought it was Satyamev Jayate. What happened to the truth?
No, nothing happened because we haven't tried enough. Because we have always been inward looking. We are still hoping that the Americans will say, oh yes, we must amend. And with all due respect, let's not all the time say it is a Sino-Wahhabi thing. There is a clear complicity of the entire Five Eye Alliance in all that is happening. Are we so dumb that we can't look at it? So it is not that the Canadians are doing it only for the sake of the next election.
Okay, I want to put this on our screens. Can we put this on our screens, please? This is an article from the Economic Times, dated 16th April 2015. Toronto, sending a strong message against terrorism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, accompanied by his Canadian counterpart Stephen Harper, today visited the Air India Memorial here to pay tributes to the 329 people, mostly of Indian origin, killed in the Kanishka bombing in 1985. That is the Indian Prime Minister standing shoulder to shoulder with the Canadian Prime Minister, marking one of the worst terror attacks in the world. Okay? So it was possible. It is possible. But then something changed. What changed? I'm assuming that Justin Trudeau, as we speak, is en route to the Kanishka Memorial. What do you suspect, Patikrit? Are we going to see the visuals very shortly of Justin Trudeau standing there along with his political supporters, those keeping him in power, and they are all going to be standing there and reading out the names of the 329 people that were killed in this terror attack?
So I think because there is a certain kind of compulsion, because the government of India has done at least certain things this time, but I still believe what the Canadian government and Trudeau is doing is just lip service. This is nothing more than that. If that government in so many years could not even find out the real perpetrators and punish them, what else do you... And I just want to make one point, Rishabh, if you give me just 10 seconds. They will keep on doing these things because we are becoming a $5 trillion economy with an independent foreign policy. Because we are a strategic partner, not an ally. Because we don't go to war,
No,
whereas
no,
when
no,
they
no.
tell us to.
Satyamev Jayate. In the Bible, it says, the truth shall set you free. C.S. Malhotra is joining us on the broadcast. His son, Atul, was one of those who was killed in the Kanishka bombing. Malhotra ji, thank you very much for taking out your time for this conversation. I know it's the 39th anniversary, sir. 39 years are now gone. Have you seen justice and closure on this, sir?
Hello?
Malhotra ji, have you seen justice and closure 39 years later?
No, nothing, never. You see, Canadian government was in league with the terrorists, and there was a total security, should I say, deliberate ignored, and they allowed this to happen. They are in complicity with the terrorists, and I don't think Canadian government can be, said to have no role in this. They are fully involved in this, and whether deliberately, knowingly, or unknowingly.
Mr. Malhotra.
So to expect anything from them, I had gone and seen the proceedings in Vancouver against the man who was alleged to have placed the bomb. You see, it's a pity. Even the judge was scared of the terrorist. And he would not like to speak anything against the criminal who was facing the charge. Canadian law is awful. It is favoring the become a terrorist heaven. And I think government of India should take very strong measures to, if they want to be friendly, they can't be friendly with our terrorists. You see what kind of this international relation is there? That you ignore a friendly nation and want to simply, glorify a terrorist. This is wrong. This is absurd.
What happened, sir?
This should not happen.
During you referred.
This should not happen.
You referred, sir, to the.
And we must take notice of it. The government must take notice of it. In 39 years, what have they done? They have done nothing. Canadian government has done nothing. They made no serious inquiries. They didn't investigate seriously. They didn't take action against the culprits very seriously. There was such a huge security lapse. Even none of the security person was held responsible. You see, these are all things which show that they were fully involved in the whole affair.
Mr. Malhotra, Inderjeet Singh Rayat, whose trial you would have been there for, Rayat, the trial you went for, sir. How do you feel that none of these people were convicted and the one person convicted is today walking free in Canada?
I told you, Canada is a terrorist heaven. Anybody goes and says that I am victim of, persecution in the country. A terrorist who has committed terrorism in the country, they will accept him as a refugee, give him all the facilities. What kind of nation is this? What kind of people are they that they accept a terrorist of another country and they are not bothered that he has committed crimes against humanity? So, you see, you can't expect from people who have such an attitude towards terrorism. Canada is with terrorism. It is spreading all those Khalistanis who are there because they are supporting him. So to expect anything from Canadian government that they will take action against
all right.
Mr.
Malhotra,
I don't think we can expect anything.
Mr. Malhotra, you're probably aware that just 72 hours ago, 3 days ago, there was a moment of silence for this Hardeep Nijjar. What do you feel about this?
This is what I am saying, that a terrorist from a country who has committed a number of acts of terrorism, he goes and settles in Canada, and Canada says, welcome, you are our refugee. No, we will give you all the facilities. You live here, we pay you for your whatever you have done. and you don't need to do any work also. This is the attitude. This is what the country should need to be done. We must tell Canadian government very firmly that this is not acceptable at all.
Would you like the Indian Parliament to take up this issue, sir?
I think the Indian Parliament must take up and very strongly and condemn the action of the Government of Canada in the Parliament through a resolution. And that should be internationally advertised.
Okay. All right. Just stay with me. Patikrit, you just heard it from Mr. Malhotra. I don't think he's minced any words on the matter. The question is, why are we shy? Because I was told when I was a young man that reciprocity is the first rule of diplomacy.
Rishabh, I simply don't know. For far too long, we have been silent. We have only raised the voice to the bare minimum level. Today, we are almost a $4 trillion economy. Today, you know the kind of interference that some of these countries are doing in your country. Today, you know the kind of damage they have done in Punjab. Today, you know the kind of interference they do in your elections. I see no reason why we should still be wearing those soft gloves. You should just make it bare open and let's expose it. There's no point having this 2+2 discussion with the US and the Canadians and then telling them silently, look, you should not do this, you should not do that. Let's for once expose what they have done. Let's for once the people realize that 9/11 was not the only terror attack which was the worst in the aviation history. Let's for one people understand the kind of games they play. I mean, our lives are not that cheap, and we only remain that way because, with all due respect, this government may have done much more than the previous ones, but still, we are not doing enough to call the spade a bloody spade.
Okay.
I mean,
all
I
right.
don't know for what reason we still remain silent when it comes to Five Eyes.
Okay, so General Dwivedi, why not? Why not? Why not take it up in Parliament? You just heard Mr. Malhotra is saying, I see no reason why a resolution should not condemn the action of the Canadians in honoring a person who was a designated terrorist by India, leading the same organization that conducted the Kanishka bombing.
Well, Rishabh, first and foremost, I share the moment of grief with Mr. Malhotra, and I think he has made some very pertinent points. I think the Canadian government or the agency were accomplices because the whole tragedy took place because of the Royal Canadian Armed Police. They faltered. They did not take the inputs of intelligence seriously, and they, in fact, wished it away. And secondly, when the bomb was placed, that means again there was a security lapse. So all I can say is three very important things. Firstly, it doesn't matter what economy of the country where we stand, but there the will of the country, and that will and that concern for your countrymen always come first and always and every time. I think this is the message our political leadership must convey, that we will not accept this because this was absolutely blatant act of terrorism. Second point, Rishabh, the issue is that until you beat the drums, world doesn't listen. And I think we have been very soft on this issue, and we have not taken very hard action. When I said diplomatically, I also was coming politically, economically. There are a lot of things can be done today because economic is the jugular vein of every nation, and we have the capacity to actually some kind of pressure on the jugular vein.
Okay.
And last point,
yes.
Rishabh, the issue is that our lives of our countrymen cannot be cheaply given away. And this is the message what
No,
Mr.
but they were cheaply given away 40 years ago. So Professor Nalapat, okay, for some reason, we are always responding on Niger, but we are never, I mean, the B.N. Kirpal investigation, Justice B.N. Kirpal investigation report, which happened, which was the Indian investigation, because it was an Air India plane, we also conducted an investigation on why it went down. It firmly concluded that it went down because it was blown up. That report had to be brought out a few months ago by NewsX. We are the ones who have to dig it out. So why aren't we asking the Canadians to now take up this issue when their own investigation, their own jurists, their own judges have come out and said that we botched it up?
Rishabh, 2 points. One, where the Sino-Wahhabi lobby is concerned, they would like to ensure that India and the West are separate from each other, that you don't have Western companies and Indian companies collaborating. You don't have Western companies investing in India and vice versa. That is what I meant. And I think that is a factual situation. And both of them are very active in India, poisoning our minds against the Western countries. Of course, on very, very factual grounds, unfortunately, in many cases, and in Western countries, poisoning against India. I would like to say that generally, I would not favor this kind of a reaction in Parliament. But given the situation, I feel that what you suggested of having a minute's silence in memory of the individual, 325 individuals, many of whom are Canadian citizens who perished in the Kanishka bombing. I think it is necessary for the simple reason that this particular lobby has struck gold in Canada. And for whatever reason, this government has been extremely, Justin Trudeau, very solicitous of the lobby. It has worked very hard to damage relations between India and the West. And yes, Pathikrit is right. This information would probably have come to Canada from the United States, where also you find a very strong presence of this lobby. So therefore, yes, I think it's a good idea. Why? To ensure that we are not going to just ignore it.
Okay.
We are going to do reciprocity. And tomorrow, if you honor a terrorist, we are going to honor the victims of terrorism.
Okay.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.